Good morning or good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. So welcome to this Stats Café on estimating progress on estimating illicit financial flows in Asia and Pacific. Before we start, I would like to invite Ms. Ricky Hansen, who is Chief of the Economic and Environmental Statistics section within ESCAP Statistics Division. Before I do that, my name is Alik Nyasulu. I'm a statistician in the Economic and Stats Division of ESCAP, and I'll be moderating this. So over to you, Ricky.
Okay, thank you, Alec, and welcome again to everyone for tuning into today's Stats Café on illicit financial flows, where we'll be hearing some of the emerging lessons coming out of the Asia-Pacific region. And this indeed is an emerging topic. Now, I was just looking a little bit at data availability before this session just about an hour ago. Illicit financial flows are captured in SDG indicator 16.4.1, and when I looked up the global SDG database, it's totally empty. No one reports on this indicator yet, so there's a lot of work to do. The indicator is specifically on the total value of inward and outward illicit financial flows. And it may not be such a mystery why so few countries or no countries can report on this. It's sort of embedded in the name, illicit financial flows. It is the kind of flows that we are trying to hide. And that, of course, also means that when we start trying to measure this, we have to rely on counterfactuals. So this is notoriously difficult, and you will hear quite a lot of things from a few people during this Stats Café, how challenging it actually is. Now, the custodian agencies for this indicator is UNCTAD and UNODC, and I'm very happy that we have also a speaker today from UNCTAD who can give us a little more background into the struggles that you guys are facing as custodian agencies. Now, the background to this Stats Café is work during the past year and a half in the context of a project that's jointly implemented by UNCTAD, UNDC and ESCAP. And the focus that we have had at ESCAP in the context of this project is on illicit tax and commercial practices. So, for example, tax evasion. And that will also be the parts of illicit financial flows that we are focusing on during the Stats Café today. I want at the outset to thank very much our stakeholders from Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan, which are the two pilot countries that have collaborated in the context of this project. And it's a very challenging topic, and we just couldn't progress without having concrete data from specific countries to work with. So my thanks to you for joining us on this journey. What we will be hearing during today's Stats Café is an overview of this project and some of the preliminary results that are coming from Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan. We'll hear something about the data sources, something about the challenges. We'll hear from the excellent consultants that we have worked with under this project. And then we have discussants I mentioned from UNCTAD and also from ESCAP's trade division, who will help us to dive a little deeper into the future of measuring illicit financial flows, and also give us some reflections and information on the impacts that illicit financial flows have on societies and economies. And as you heard from my colleague Alec, he will be moderating, and part of his moderating will also be to due diligence and get our speakers properly introduced. So with that, welcome again to today's Stats Cafe. And Alec, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Rike, for those insightful opening remarks and really reminding us about the gap that exists under this indicator. So a lot of work to go. So at this juncture, I would like to invite Anastasia Manga. Anastasia is a consultant in the ESCAP Statistics Division and has been leading the work in Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan. So I give Anastasia the floor. You have a maximum of 15 minutes.
Thank you. Can you see my slides now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Hello, dear participants of our Stats Cafe. I'm a consultant, regional consultant for Asia IFFF project, and today I'm going to present some of the preliminary results of our project and do a quick overview as to what we were doing in this project. The project is called IFFF, it's Illicit Financial Flows, and we were working in two pilot countries in ESCAP, the countries of Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan. These are developing countries located in Central Asia. Uzbekistan has a higher GDP, more developed economy. Kyrgyzstan, lower GDP and lower population. We were trying to calculate, measure the illicit financial flows and compare, and also most importantly, trying to estimate the economic, the magnitude of those illicit financial flows for the economies of two countries to be able to report the indicator 16.4.1. We started with estimating the risks of illicit financial flows in these countries. We did a comprehensive analysis.
Anastasia, we don't see your PowerPoint.
Oh, sorry. It has, for some reason, stopped presenting.
Yeah, now we see it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Trying to handle with this. Okay, so two countries, Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan, one bigger, one smaller, both located in Central Asia in proximity to China and Russia, big participants in the international trade arena. There's for both countries, we're trying to estimate first the risks as to where potentially the illicit financial flows come from or where they go to, and what areas produce the illicit financial flows. We have been provided the theoretical framework for illicit financial flows. By the way, this project is only dealing with tax and commercial illicit financial flows, as compared to project dealing with crime-related IFFs. This is done by UNODC. So we are only working with tax and commercial IFFs. In both Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan, we estimated the risks and found that trade is the most significant source of IFFs in both countries. This was supported by data. This was supported by literature reviews and interviews with experts in both countries. Trade, especially proximity to big participants in international trade, contributes to IFFs for both economies. On the other hand, and other forms of IFFs connected with trade are anything related to misinvoicing of trade flows, either it's mispricing or misreporting, other forms of misreporting the quantities, also smuggling, complete unreporting of some flows of trade. For both countries, those were quite significant. Also, tax avoidance by both individuals and corporations was also voiced to be one of the primary concerns. Especially important, experts are named to be tax avoidance by individuals who transfer money across the border. So we try to focus on that or that area too. And both countries named drug trafficking to be one of the most vulnerable areas. But that part is not measured in our project. Both countries had multiple stakeholders taking part in the project. And both countries had special leading agency, the focal agency that was responsible for coordination of the process of measurement. In Uzbekistan, it was Academy of the General Prosecutor's Office, and in Kyrgyzstan, it's National Statistical Office. And main data owners and stakeholders in the project were Customs Authority, Tax Authority, and National Bank. In both countries, we used a few methods. The most popularly used methods to estimate IFFs from trade normally are partner country method and price filter method. We applied both in both countries. At least we tried to some extent because of the data availability limits. On the other hand, we also tried to estimate the impact of tax avoidance in offshore areas and tax havens. In both countries, we were also given this methodology in the general guidelines developed by UNCTAD. And in Kyrgyzstan, in Uzbekistan, we also tried to estimate that the IFFs from illicit remittances. This method is our suggestion to estimate some IFFs which were not covered by the general framework. In Kyrgyzstan, we also paid attention to a method that we called Gray Re-Export, and today Chingiz is going to speak about that method. So I'll just give a general overview as to what we have done and what we have found. So as to IFFs from trade, both PCM and PFM we used in both countries, the magnitude of them in both countries is quite different. If you take a look at this chart, I'll try to highlight. We can see that in Uzbekistan, so here we compare the results of price of partner country method, which basically compares mirror statistics of the reporting country and the partners. The mirror statistics can be compared in different categories of goods reported. So we use different classifications. We use aggregate level 6 of good classification, aggregate level 4 and aggregate level 2. We found for both countries that aggregate level 6, if we compare mirror statistics on trade of goods in categories with 6-digit codes, we find large discrepancies. We also have found that this may not necessarily be due to illicit character of those misinvoicing patterns. It may be just due to a common mistake, which is why we also did the estimation on aggregate level 4 and 2, and we also find them to be consistent with the first, but quite less than aggregate level 6 estimate. So, for example, aggregate level 4 for both countries is somewhere in the middle between 6 and 2. So we also compared these flows estimated through PCM method, partner country method, with the results using price filter method. This method estimates abnormal prices on trade transactions, and we found them to be quite abundant within the trade flows for both countries. So we compared the results of IFF PFM method, this is the yellow line for both countries, with the results on our partner country method. They were in general quite consistent with each other. For Uzbekistan, however, total illicit financial flows from trade were found to be less than the sum of total trade flows. But in Kyrgyzstan, IFFs from trade happen to be higher than the sum of import and export. So it's quite a significant impact that trade-related IFFs have on the economy of Kyrgyzstan. If we compare the elements of IFFs for trade for both countries, we found that in Uzbekistan, it's quite consistent. The sources of IFF, both inward and outward IFFs are present in the economy. For Kyrgyzstan, it is primarily inward-oriented illicit financial flows that come from under-invoiced import, primarily with the trade from the trade with China. We estimated illicit remittances. Illicit remittances are illicit financial flows that come from remittances from abroad. In the course of literature review, we have discovered that transfers from abroad, they constitute quite a high proportion of GDPs of both countries. And we also have studied literature to find where these flows come from. They come primarily from the Russian Federation, where the migrants from these two countries, Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan, travel for work and transfer money back home. However, we also know from the literature review and the expert interviews that not all of those transfers actually come from official employment, which makes them partially illicit. We compared potentially available transfers legally that can legally arise from we studied only one case with the Russian Federation from Russia with the actual transfers that are recorded in the data of central banks of both countries of the partners. And we found those potentially illicit flows to be, again, quite significant for Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan both. These here are the patterns. So for Uzbekistan, it almost reached $2.5 billion in the year 2020. For Kyrgyzstan, the maximum value was close to $1.5 billion, which is also quite significant considering the size of the economy of Kyrgyzstan. So this is one of the vulnerability points. And the third set of methods we commonly used in both countries was tax evasion through offshores. We found these flows to be not very significant for both economies. You can see here, if we measure them $1 million, it's close. Maximum value for Uzbekistan was $5 million, and this happened in the year 2018 after loosening of currency controls in Uzbekistan. In Kyrgyzstan, this value was less than $1 million for all years, and in some years it was close to zero. Such value we have due to just the limitations of the method itself of estimating offshore financial flows. So we found these flows to be not very significant for both countries. And now we have only limited estimates of illicit financial flows for both countries. So using the three sets of methods, if we combine all of them together, allowing, of course, that there is quite a significant overlap between the flows, we haven't yet separated them. So we have just put them together, all illicit financial flows estimated by our methods. And now we can compare to the sizes of both economies. So we find it to be almost, so the maximum out of all years we have used for estimation, this is just 4 years. For Uzbekistan, illicit financial flows in total reached almost 43% of the economy, which is quite a lot. But for Kyrgyzstan, the maximum percentage was almost 150% of the economy of Kyrgyzstan, which is quite significant, which is a tremendous effect. So the size of illicit financial flows larger than the officially reported economy. That's we, of course, these are preliminary results. They are not yet reported, but that's what the data showed us in these countries. So we found them to be quite large. And this is all I can report you at this moment in time. I hope soon we have all our results reported, described, and everyone will have access to it. Thank you very much. Okay, and I will accept questions, I believe, if there are.
I think maybe we can hold on to the questions, and if I can invite Chingiz, then we can have we can take questions from Chingiz as well as you, Anastasia.
Let's try. Chingiz, can you hear us? Chingiz, we cannot hear you. Can you change your earphones? Sometimes it does happen.
Chingiz Beknov is our consultant based in Kyrgyzstan, so he's been working on the project at a country level.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm very sorry, something is wrong with my device. I re-enter from the other.
Okay. You have the floor now. You can proceed, Chingiz.
Yes, thank you, Alec, for giving me the floor. Hello, dear colleagues, dear participants. I'd like to inform you what we have done while measuring illicit financial flows in Kyrgyzstan using an alternative method called as gray re-export. And I will tell you some preliminary results that we have. So next slide, please. Yeah, so all of us knows what is re-export of goods. It is a situation when certain goods are imported from one country to the second country, and then these goods are re-exported to the third country or countries. But what is gray re-export? So gray re-export, it is a part of goods smuggling, the main purpose of which is to import goods using illegal or semi-legal ways into one country with the aim of subsequent resale to the same goods to other countries. And while most of such re-export are not taken into account in the official statistics of the country. So the main mechanism of gray re-export is recognized as a number of methods of import and subsequent re-export of goods. Among them, false classification of goods, manipulation of customs rules, forgery of customs documents, artificial underestimation of volumes and prices of goods, corruption, and as a result of which a certain part of the goods crosses border without accounting and registration, manipulation with goods associated with the change of the country of origin of imported goods in order to give imported goods the status of local production for subsequent export to other countries without paying any customs fees and taxes within intergovernment agreements. So above mentioned methods give the opportunity to resell import goods at a lower price rather than the goods are imported directly from country importer to country consumer. So next slide, please. So I would like to tell you about the situation in Kyrgyzstan concerning gray re-export. According to the opinion of most experts, the gray re-export exists in Kyrgyzstan more than 20 years, and the main object of which is Chinese textile and clothes. The main route of the gray re-export is when textile and clothes are coming from China to Kyrgyzstan, and then they are re-exporting to the CIS countries or customs union countries, especially to Russia and Kazakhstan, that are the biggest markets of the customs union. So the main methods are manipulation of customs rules and falsification of foreign trade documentation. As a result of which we can see negative consequences as tax and customs evasions. So state budgets of both re-exporting country and country consumer are suffering from not receiving completely payments of taxes and customs fees from grey re-export. The main reasons of existence of the grey re-export in Kyrgyzstan are as follows. From one hand, Kyrgyzstan has common border with China, and both Kyrgyzstan and China are member states in World Trade Organization. That gives to Kyrgyzstan the opportunity of some trade privileges while importing goods from China. From the other hand, Kyrgyzstan is a member state of a free trade zone of the CIS countries, and since 2015, Kyrgyzstan is a member state of the customs union that unite Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Russia, and Kyrgyzstan. And this fact gives the opportunity to Kyrgyzstan to export to the customs union market goods without paying any customs fees. Thus, above mentioned reasons from the point of grey re-export contributes to the existence of such trade flow in the following way. Kyrgyz Republic using privileges from World Trade Organization and neighborhood with China, as well as above mentioned trade manipulation, import goods from China and then using privileges from custom union, re-export previously imported goods to Russia and Kazakhstan. So next slide, please. So at this slide, I would like to introduce you preliminary evaluation and research made and learned before we started estimating grey re-export. So before we started estimation, we took statistics data from Comtrade and compare a trade flow of all goods from China to Kyrgyzstan within 3 years. And as you can see, we found a big differences between trade indicators. So China reports that it exported to Kyrgyzstan in 2018 goods on a value of more than $5 billion US, in 2019 more than $6 billion US, and in 2020 more than $2 billion US. At the same time, Kyrgyzstan reports that it imported from China much less goods. In 2018 almost $2 billion US, gap more than $3.5 billion US. In 2019, $1.7 billion US, and the gap is more than $4.5 billion US. And 2020, Kyrgyzstan reports that it imported from China goods almost on $736 million US. The gap is more than $2 billion US. Thus, we consider the line gap in the table as possible volume of grey re-export. And I'd like to underline that this evaluation was preliminary made, and we didn't use any methods to estimation, as well as we didn't apply any adjustments. Moreover, I would like to tell you that our local information and analytical agency called as Timira Flight made some research and journalist investigation and revealed differences in trade indicators of China and Kyrgyzstan. According to this research, the trade gap between China and Kyrgyzstan in 2021 was $4.8 billion US. That is to say, China reports that in 2021 it exported goods to Kyrgyzstan on $6.2 billion, but Kyrgyzstan reports that in 2021 it imported goods from China only on $1.4 billion. And as a result of such trade gap, the budget of the Kyrgyz Republic lost in 2021 almost $573 million only due to not payment of import VAT, which is 20% from the invoice price. And it's just talking about import VAT, not taking into account customs fees and other internal taxes, for example, income tax, sales tax, and so on. In addition, this agency made estimation of the largest category of goods in trade between China and Kyrgyzstan, that is clothes, and they revealed the gap on $1.94 billion. That shows us the difference almost in 40 times between trade indicators of China and Kyrgyzstan. So next slide, please. Considering the above mentioned, I'd like to show you a visual picture of the gray re-export flow. As you can see here, the slide goods are imported from China using different trade and customs manipulations, as I have mentioned before. And after that, some value of imported goods is consumed in Kyrgyzstan on the local market, and the rest of the value is re-exported mainly to Russia and Kazakhstan using trade privilege of the customs unions, specifically duty-free trade, as Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and Russia are member states of the customs union. So next slide, please. So taking into account all the above mentioned, and of course, as you know, if we see a trade flow in one direction, then we should see money flow in reverse direction. And here at this slide, we see the money flow from gray re-export, which is going from Russia and Kazakhstan through Kyrgyzstan and then to China. Next slide, please. So at this slide, you can see so-called circulation of gray re-export when the goods are going to one direction and money are going to reverse direction. The red arrows shows us trade flow, and yellow arrows shows us money flow back to China through the territory of Kyrgyzstan. Next slide, please. So considering the above mentioned, I would like to show you and some of a kind confirmation of the existence of gray re-export. It is a real case that took place in 2019. In 2020, this case was detected by Kyrgyz law enforcement agency, and investigative actions were carried out. And in 2022, local Kyrgyz court passed judgment on Chinese and Kyrgyz citizens and found them guilty of committing unlawful acts. This case, as I have already said, happened in 2019, where a Chinese citizen organized a criminal group consisted from both Chinese and Kyrgyz citizens, with the aim to establish gray re-export of Chinese goods to Russia through the territory of Kyrgyzstan. Here we see that goods, mainly textile and clothes, first were exported from China to Kyrgyzstan, and then in Kyrgyzstan, the goods went through customs clearance using different methods. And after that, they gave the status of local produced goods to previously imported Chinese goods to subsequent export from Kyrgyzstan to Russia, previously imported Chinese goods without paying any customs and fees within duty-free rules between member states of the customs union. After they re-exported Chinese goods to Russia, they faced with some kind of a problem. How to transfer money back to China. They couldn't do it officially and transfer money directly to China because, in fact, the goods from China were exported to Kyrgyzstan. And Russia imported goods from Kyrgyzstan. And while most of goods were exported by semi-legal ways or smuggled. So what they did next, they smuggled cash, almost $7 million to Kyrgyzstan using cash couriers, informal system of money transferring and so on. And after that, when money was smuggled to Kyrgyzstan, they set up shell companies, opened bank accounts, falsified foreign trade documents, and transferred through one of our Kyrgyz banks $7 million to China. And this is only one case of gray re-export that was detected and revealed. Next slide, please. Now let me tell you about measurement of illicit financial flows from gray re-export that we did. First of all, I'd like to present you the calculation formula of gray re-export, which looks like import minus export of goods plus production, I mean local production of goods, and minus consumption, domestic consumption, where X is goods, A, the country of origin for the goods, B, the importer of good X, and C, the country of destination to which the good X is later exported or re-exported from country B. T is year. And if we compare this formula with previous case to understand the formula clearly, I can compare it with the previous case where X is Chinese textile, for example, or clothes. A is China, B is Kyrgyz Republic, C is Russia. We also made some adjustments while estimating gray re-export. For example, we used CIF and FOP adjustments according to partner country method, as well as we adjusted internal production of goods and domestic consumption of goods. Some data was taken from Comtrade, for example, value of imported and exported goods, and other data was taken from National Statistics Committee. So next slide, please. So in order to estimate gray re-export, we decided to take the biggest category of goods that are imported from China to Kyrgyzstan. It is textile, especially clothes, that includes 4 commodity codes, 61, 62, 63, and 64. And the period estimated is 7 years, from 2014 till 2020. Here at the slide, you can see the table with adjustments and calculations made. So the first line is clothes that were produced in Kyrgyzstan. The second line is clothes that were imported from China. And the third line is the total value of goods on the Kyrgyz market, including produced and imported clothes. The fourth line is domestic consumption, and the fifth line shows us the balance of clothes after domestic consumption that we consider to be a potential value to be exported or re-exported. The sixth line shows us the data on export clothes from Kyrgyzstan, and the seventh line is to be considered as illicit financial flows from gray re-export. Thus, let me explain you in details considering 1 year, for example, 2014. So in 2014, Kyrgyzstan produced clothes on almost 104 million US dollars and imported goods on almost 3 billion, 42 million US dollars. And the total value of clothes on Kyrgyz market was 3 billion, 147 US dollars, from which the value on 387 million US dollars was consumed, and only 103 million US dollars was exported. And after domestic consumption, we see the balance of goods of on 2 billion 759 US dollars, and from this value we subtract export amount, and as a result we get the IFF from gray re-export. And if we look at the chart on this slide, we can see that every year there is a big amount of import, small amount of export and domestic consumption, as well as a big amount of balance after consumption. So there is a logical question: why does Kyrgyzstan every year imports a large amount of clothes if it consumes and exports much less? And the second question is, what does Kyrgyzstan do with the large amount of clothes that are left after consumption and export? The answer, I think, is that the balance of clothes after consumption and export is probably a gray re-export, and this balance re-exported to customs union countries. So you can see at the chart the red line that shows us the amount of value of clothes and textiles that was re-exported using illegal or semi-illegal ways and was not reflected in official statistics of the Kyrgyz Republic. In other words, the red line we consider to be illicit financial flows from the gray re-export. So next slide, please. So still, there are some steps to do. We need to be more concrete, so there are some steps to do. What exactly? As for now, we need to determine the ratio of domestic consumption of locally produced goods and define domestic consumption of locally produced and imported goods to see which amount of goods was really exported and which amount was re-exported. And after it, we need to estimate unreported and misreported re-export and estimate illicit financial flows from gray re-export using alternative calculation formula, where we should combine unreported and misreported re-export. As well as we need to compare the result of illicit financial flows from gray re-export with illicit financial flows from partner country method, because IFFs from gray re-export is a part of IFFs from partner country method. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Chingiz, for a very interesting presentation on the gray exports, and I think those involved in compiling balance of payments, for example, really understand this kind of challenge of source of origin. So quite interesting topic. So before we invite the next set of presenters, we have some few questions which I will address to both you, Chingiz, and Anastasia. So the first question was from Arivik. The question was, Anastasia, can you read it from the chat or should I read it out?
I see it now. Thank you, Oleg. Can IFFs be measured retrospectively and take measures accordingly? Well, this is what we did measure for years that we have data for. We can measure IFFs retrospectively back to whatever years we can find the data for, basically. But measures to be taken, I think if we find specific patterns, just like we found in Kyrgyzstan, most data that we were working with were historical. If we find specific patterns and we find specific elements of IFFs that are prevalent in specific economy that we are measuring, then obviously the more data points we have, the better for estimation. So I'm not sure whether measures can be taken retrospectively, but retrospective analysis will help to build a clearer picture about IFFs and try and predict some possible patterns in the future. Chingiz, do you agree with me?
Well, I think if I were to give my opinion, I would say I think the tricky part is the pattern that comes up historically, because it can vary widely because it's not a consistent kind of transaction. So it could be common when, maybe authorities are cracking so much on it. So maybe things might be hidden and the data might actually show something very different across the years. It could be a very volatile time series, yeah, but possible.
Thank you, Oleg.
There is another question there, Anastasia, that was specifically addressed to you. Maybe you can just read that through. I don't need to, yeah.
The question will be for the valuable presentation of Anastasia. The slide containing the bar chart comparing the GDP of Uzbekistan and the IFF value. Do you think that the results are significant within the framework of your own experience? Uzbekistan. Okay, let me go back to my slides and back. Can you see it again?
Yes, I can. Well, we can see it. At least I can see it.
Well, these results are preliminary, and we have not yet reported the results of our research. We have just briefly discussed them with our counterparties in Uzbekistan, if this question is precisely about Uzbekistan. So we know exactly that the government in Uzbekistan is very much interested in continuing the estimation and in the results of estimation process. And our main coordinating agency, the Academy of General Prosecutor's Office, is responsible for the estimation of indicator and is going to report the results to the authorities that consequently are going to probably take measures and introduce policies. Our project has not yet included any policies, but there's going to be a recommendation issued. So whether or not the results of Uzbekistan are going to be acted upon, well, obviously there's going to be an action provided. But I'm not sure what do you mean by whether they are going to be significant or not. In my own experience, I think they are significant. And 42% of an economy is quite a large value anyway. We have not calculated any losses to budget of Uzbekistan from unpaid taxes and duties, considering that most of these IFFs come from trade and there are some duties underpaid also. So yes, we think these results are significant and should be taken into account in formulation of future policies. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have another question. I think maybe this is dwelling very much on Cengiz's presentation. It says for import and export.
Yes.
Yes.
Cengiz, can you hear me, or can you read the question?
Yes, yes.
Can I read it for you?
Question is while import and export. Oh, I can read it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. While import and export are well documented and have standardized procedures of registration, what about the reliability of data on consumption and production? Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, you are right, but I can tell you that the data on consumption and production is reliable because it was taken from our National Statistics Committee, that is every year makes records of consumption and production internal, I mean domestic.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the customs union that Kyrgyzstan is involved, I think for our colleagues in trade, they know this concept very well, where they call it trade deflection, where a country which is not part of the union will always be motivated to get into the to the union illegally, and I think that's what we're seeing there. That you want to take advantage of Kyrgyzstan and Russia free trade area, and maybe get a lot of so. I think that's a very good trick in terms of data from the production side from national statistics vis-a-vis the supply of imports. And yeah, so thanks so much. If there are no any other questions, I think for just consistency's sake, I'll invite now my colleague Alex Kranchenko. He's Economic Affairs Officer in ESCAP's Trade, Investment and Innovation Division. His work is also involving trade, so I thought with the gray exports, there will be some sort of a continuity from the discussion that we've been having here. So Alex, you have the floor.
Thanks very much, Alec, for the kind introduction. Thank you for having me here. Yes, I was very interested in the previous discussions because it really does complement the work that we've been doing here at the Trade Division. First of all, what is trade misinvoicing and how does it relate to illicit financial flows? So the pioneering work for this was done by Raymond Baker, and he's the founder and president of an outfit called the Global Financial Integrity, or GFI. So when they published this work, the initial quantitative study produced by them estimated that up to $1 trillion US has been lost by the developing countries through the illicit financial flows. So this methodology, the original, was quite basic. It received some criticism, but it really, the reason that I would argue that we're even talking about the illicit financial flows is very much because of their initial work. So they really put this topic on the map. And trade misinvoicing is just one part of the illicit financial flows. I think the GFI argued it was something like 87% of total IFFs. I'm not sure if that's correct. But because we're from the trade division here, we work on the trade issue, so we only look at the misinvoicing part of the illicit financial flows. And so I define this, or it's commonly defined as when price, quantity, or description of internationally traded goods is purposefully misrepresented. And the first study I did on this in 2018, I estimated that about $200 billion was lost in tax revenue in 2016 in Asia Pacific region due to such trade misinvoicing. And to give you a perspective how much that is, that's about the total official development aid in the same year was only 160 billion. So 200 billion of lost tax revenue in Asia Pacific alone, potentially, that could, very well substitute all the official development aid that's been given to the developing countries. So besides measuring it, we hypothesized that trade facilitation, in particular cross-border share of trade data and documents, could help address misinvoicing. So because again, as you've seen from the presentations earlier, they talked about falsification of customs declaration. That's basically what happens. And so what we suggested is that, well, if you share information, China, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, and so forth, you will very much see immediately that there are discrepancies between import and export declarations. So that was the initial study. Most recently this year, I've actually tried to find statistical evidence if this may in fact be true. Do countries that do have this sophisticated level of information exchange, does this make a difference with the trade misinvoicing? So I built index. Sorry, it's a little bit technical, but basically it looks at the difference, the absolute difference of the mirror values. So somebody's imports is somebody else's exports. So what is the difference between these two in their total trade? And as you can see, basically the smaller the value, there's no difference. The bigger the value, there's more difference, and it's index restricted between 0 and 100. And plotting this between the countries in the Asia Pacific region, you can see that, I hope you can see here, this is Southeast Asia trading, so that's Brunei, Indonesia, Khmer, Laos, trading with countries in Central Asia that have the most red. That means there's more misinvoicing happening there, or maybe it's not misinvoicing because it's possible that there is a lag between imports and exports. So imports and exports in 1 year takes so long that by the time they arrive at their destination, their imports in a different financial year. So that's one of the main reasons why imports and exports don't match. But it's generally acknowledged that there is definitely truth in this purposeful misrepresentation of imports and export declarations, and it shows up quite clearly at the difference between what countries export versus what somebody imports from them when you compare it, because you have two data points describing essentially what should be the same transaction. So I used this index, and then I superimposed it with the survey data. So this is this survey. It's called the Digital Sustainable Trade Facilitation Survey. It's a biennial survey that's done by the commissions of the United Nations all over the world, and it covers 58 trade facilitation measures, which are classified in 5 groups and 11 subgroups. So there are transparency, formalities, institutional arrangement, cooperation, paperless trade, and cross-border paperless trade. So this survey is fact-based rather than perception-based. It's a 3-step approach to data collection and validation. So the first one is we collect open data from experts. Second step is data is verified by UN regional commissions. And third is data is validated by national governments. So if you follow the link, you'll see more information on individual economies. And so this is what data looks like. Like I said, it's 58 something measures, and defined into different groups like paperless trade, whether they have automated custom systems, whether internet connection is available to customs, whether they have an electronic single window system, and 0 if it's not implemented, 3 fully implemented, and 1 and 2 somewhere in between there. If we just look at scatter charts here, and this is just one of the measures, the paperless trade category, you can see that countries that have more implemented measures, and this is over 3 different years, when you look at the mismatching prevalence scores, the simple index I constructed to show the discrepancies, you can see there's a very clear negative association here. Right, so this is the own implementation, and there's no clear pattern of the trade partners implementation, whether the mismatching is higher or lower. So besides looking at the scatter plots, I then ran a regressional analysis using this mismatching index, and then I put all these measures, so own implementation, that's country I, and country J, the partner implementation. And so you can see that, and also controlled for normal variables you would use in gravity models like GDP, official common language, and contiguity, whether they next to each other, and how far they are each other, whether they're part of some sort of free trade agreement, as well as added fixed effect. But you can see here, so negative coefficients essentially means the more country implements paperless measures, the less likely are they to have discrepancy between mirror trade values. For cross-border paperless trade, because there are relatively few measures, you don't actually see a significant effect here, but interestingly, partner implementation of measures has a negative effect. So the regression was moderately significant with R-square of 25, so it's nothing fantastic, but the significance of the coefficients says that there's definitely something to it. So the next step, what I've done is that I looked at estimated the extra tax revenue if the implementation of those measures were complete. So what I've done is I've taken each country's individual implementation rates, and then I looked at how much more they needed to go, and I looked at the coefficients, and then I estimated how much the discrepancy would fall. The problem a little bit there is because the discrepancy could be going either way without making assumptions, right? It could be because the exports are over invoiced or imports are under invoiced. So there's a little bit uncertainty which data do you trust more. So I assumed you can trust either. It's either one or. So if potentially if you account for, and it's not just the tariff revenue, it's also the profit revenue you would get from companies, it's also the GST tax, it's also the GST rebates you get on the exports. So trying to collate all this information, I added up that in the Asia Pacific region, the governments can save anywhere between 119 to 183 billion dollars in revenue per year, and that's obviously a substantial amount. I'd like to talk more of the methodologies, but I've been given limited time here. So in conclusion, basically, besides measuring it, okay, so we measure it, what do we do? No, what do we do with this? The key here to the, at least with misinvoicing part of the illicit financial flows, is that trade facilitation does seem to indeed improve the mismatching, which is where illicit financial flows are from misinvoicing. And this study confirms it. And so really countries should start implementing cross-border data exchange. And one way to do this is through ESCAP's own framework agreement on facilitation of cross-border paperless trade in Asia and the Pacific. It's a trade facilitation agreement, newest UN treaty. Already 10 members have either signed or acceded to it, including China, Turkmenistan, most recently. And really, it looks like besides making trade cheaper, it will also close these loopholes for illicit financial flows. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex, for that very elaborate presentation and actually giving a very practical perspective on all potential losses of revenue. If there are any questions, I'll hold on to them for now, and I'll ask our colleague, Boyan, from the UNCTAD to present.
Thank you very much, Alik. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Can you just please confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen. And just to add, Boyan is a statistician in UNCTAD and has been actively involved in this work, not just within Asia, but also their work in Africa. So, Boyan, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And thank you for this introduction. So I'll try and be brief. So in the next 2 hours, I hope we'll be able to cover everything. I don't hear any objections, so buckle up. Anyways, so as has been mentioned earlier, the SDG indicator 16.4.1 measures the total value of inward and outward illicit financial flows. I think this is a crucial in understanding of illicit financial flows, specifically when we discuss trade misinvoicing, for example. So usually what happens in trade is, goods come one way and the money flows the other way. Now with illicit financial flows, they could be generated either from exports or from imports. We could have the exports under invoicing or import over invoicing that are generating the outward illicit financial flows. And on the contrary, the situation holds for the inward illicit financial flows. Now, why is this important? Where illicit financial flows have various impacts on our economies or societies, such as the loss of public resources. This is when the money is being drained outside of our country. On the other hand, when we have inward illicit financial flows, this can fuel corruption, this can diminish the rule of law in our countries and so on. So these are all important aspects that we need to consider when we address the question of illicit financial flows. Now, UNCTAD and UNODC, as custodians of that SDG indicator, are responsible for first to develop the methodologies and guide countries or support countries in their own national exercises to measure illicit financial flows. And second, to collect and report statistics on illicit financial flows. Rika has mentioned in the opening that essentially, as of today, there are no official statistics on illicit financial flows. And this is the case right now, and it will remain for quite a bit, as it seems. So why are we there where we are? And of course, what lays ahead? So to answer the question of no data reported, of course, the primary question by custodian agencies and a task force that has been designed to address the question of measurement, they have started to look into what are illicit financial flows. The conceptual framework for the statistical measurement of illicit financial flows produces a definition of IFFs for statistical purposes. So those are the flows that are illicit in origin, transfer, or use, reflecting an exchange of value and crossing country borders. So those are the four main elements of the definition. And as such, this leads to four main types or categories of illicit financial flows. On one hand, on the left-hand side, we have in this chart here, we have illicit tax and commercial practices. So those are the illicit financial flows from tax and commercial practices. So this is where UNCTAD is heavily involved, and this is what the project and those activities in Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan have been working on. It is important to note here that we have here a slight, let's say, two layers of it. So one is the illegal tax and commercial practices, such as the tax evasion or trade misinvoicing. So those are illegal activities. On the other hand, illicit financial flows also can include some legal activities, such as the aggressive tax avoidance, such as the profit shifting of multinational enterprises. So those may not be necessarily illegal, but they have a detrimental effect on the sustainable development. And as such, they are included in the SDG indicator 1641. The other three types are more under the, let's say, purvey or custodianship of UNODC, such as the illegal markets, corruption, and exploitation type or terrorism financing. But after this conceptual framework has been set up with four main features, one is that it looks at the IFFs at a country level. So this is in line with the SDG indicator framework. Secondly, it provides a disaggregation of IFFs by different types. And we have discussed today, we are looking at trade misinvoicing specifically in the cases. So Alexei has said it, and also, you know, Anastasia and Chingiz have presented how they work actually, and they have looked mainly, predominantly at the trade misinvoicing part. So of course, the question then comes at a later stage, how to put all these values together. And I think this is addressing one of the questions that has been raised in the chat. Third feature of the conceptual framework is that it is comprehensive. It should look at the main types of IFFs that are present in the countries, but most of all, it should be compatible with already established concepts and standards in economics and accounting, such as the balance of payments or the system of national accounts. In March this year, the conceptual framework has been endorsed by the UN Statistical Commission. And as of now, we have a common basis to look at our statistics and measurement exercises. Of course, the next step is, okay, so how do we measure those illicit financial flows? Well, we have to be reminded constantly that illicit financial flows are by definition hidden, which means we are only able to observe the traces that they live in official economies. UNCTAD has been working on the tax and commercial IFFs, producing a draft methodological guidelines for the pilot testing. So addressing trade misinvoicing, addressing aggressive tax avoidance, and addressing tax evasion by individuals. On the other hand, in parallel, crime-related IFFs, such as drug trafficking, smuggling of migrants, trafficking in person, wildlife trafficking, and so on, has been developed by UNODC partners. And we are now, let's say, finalizing a very critical stage, which is the so-called pilot testing of the methodologies. So up to date, or essentially by the end of this year, 22 countries, 4 in Latin America and the Caribbean, 12 in Africa, and 6 in Asia and the Pacific, will have completed the testing of the methodologies, and all these results, preliminary results and experience gained, and also all the other lessons learned, are crucial as a feedback to refine the methodologies, to take it a step further, to say, okay, this works, we can apply it in many countries, now we can go ahead with this methodology. On the other hand, the other method didn't produce results because of unreliable method itself, or because of data are simply not available for that. So let us try and see what else can be put forward to measure IFFs. As a major, let's say, outcome or this whole lesson learned in the process is that this is a multi-stakeholder process. So many national agencies, but also at the international level. As I mentioned earlier, we have a task force, and all these activities are supported not only by UNCTAD and UNODC, but also by regional commissions. ESCAP, in this case, who hugely supported the activities. But at the national level, we have a plethora of national agencies involved. Some bring expertise, some bring data, some bring, technical infrastructure, and so on. Ideally, these processes at the national level are led by statistical authorities. We are discussing a technical task, a statistical measurement of illicit financial flows. And why is this important? This is important to provide strong evidence base for later on policy formulation. Now, when we discuss illicit financial flows, of course, data to address or reflect on illicit financial flows are scattered across many agencies. Some are lying with the customs authorities, some are with the tax authorities, some are with the judicial system, some are with the police, some are with the national statistical offices. So that's why all this national collaboration cross agencies is crucial in getting the measurement side onwards. Now, as co-custodians, as I mentioned earlier, our primary task is first to provide a conceptual transparency. So we have been able to produce a conceptual framework which can now be applied by everyone. Now, some of the earlier results or research, let's say in the last decade, they have addressed potentially different parts of illicit financial flows. Therefore, we cannot refer to them as official statistics on illicit financial flows. Rather, within the SDG indicator framework, a nationally owned, nationally driven process to measure illicit financial flows is required. In order to do this, we need robust and statistically sound estimates. So this is being now offered through methodological guidelines in the refinement process. However, ultimately, we will reach a so-called, and we will produce a so-called statistical framework for the measurement of illicit financial flows. So this will include all the concepts that are relevant and all the methodologies that are relevant for specific types of illicit financial flows, either from trade misinvoicing, either from drugs, either from smuggling of migrants. And of course, the questions of how to bring all these figures together is still open. We are working closely with various experts, including experts from ESCAP, to address those questions, to refine the methods and to find overlaps and to produce measures how to aggregate specific elements or specific types of illicit financial flows into a single SDG indicator, 1641. So in order to get there, of course, our task and our commitment is to support countries and to enhance statistical capacity. So how do we do this? There are various forms. It could be either through the UN Development Account project, such as this one that is just ending. There's a new one coming up. Of course, limited resources are there, but we try to work together with the regional commissions. There is specific technical cooperation activities that may take place, but essentially we're all striving to get to a solid, independent, robust evidence base, which can further be used for policy formulation and action. With this, I will stop and thank you for now, Alik. Back to you.
Thank you, Bojan, and for your presentation. So I will now invite any questions from the floor on our last two presenters, or for those that presented earlier on. I do see there is a question in the chat. It says, what are the preconditions for the experts to look at certain countries' performance in terms of IFFs? For instance, if there is no tax trade unions with neighbors. The country is not a WTO member. The country is implementing cross-border paperless trade, etc. We can simply say without estimation that such a country might have low level of IFFs. So to our panelists and presenters, maybe you can take this question. I don't want to point it. Yeah, so Alex, maybe you might wish to start this one because I saw you talk about the paperless issues in your presentation. So maybe your reflections would be worth a while here.
So just with regard to the paperless trade, I mean, developed countries such as Singapore are at the forefront of digitalization in their custom procedures. So you would think they would have a low level of illicit financial flows in Hong Kong, but they're actually hubs for money laundering and illicit financial flows. And that's because it depends, at least from the trade perspective here, not just on their own implementation of cross-border paperless trade procedures, but also of their trade partners, which is why you see the illicit financial flows going from Central Asia into Singapore, from China into Hong Kong. Just my 2 cents. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any other reactions to this?
Like, if I may, just a very short one, just to complement what Alex has said.
Please, go ahead.
Yes, obviously, there are more reasons or causes for the IFFs, as there are more types of IFFs rather than just the trade misinvoicing or the trade-related IFFs. And all of this spectrum needs to be considered when we discuss the illicit financial flow. So if you address one part, of course, this may be lower, but there are so many other aspects that I think it would be, as Alex said, just hard to say without any insight or in-depth activity what is essentially going on in terms of illicit financial flows in a country. Thanks.
Thank you. Maybe I'll ask a question to all the panelists at once now. I think in Enrique's opening remarks, I think one thing that came out clearly was the lack of data on 16.4.1. And I think this is just a matter of deflection for all of us to say, what should we do, or what should be our role to say that maybe in the next cycle, next year or thereabout, what can we actually do to see some data flowing into the global database? What exactly should we do? This is open to everyone. I can see a hand from Bojan. And Anastasia as well.
Yeah, Anastasia had a hand her up first.
Okay,
so maybe
I'll
she
get
can come in
Anastasia
first.
first, then we'll go to Bojan.
I actually was going to answer the previous question about the propensity of a country towards IFFs, or rather, I think the question was discussed more in line with trade IFFs. In any case, if a country has substantial amount of trade in relation to GDP, a large proportion of trade towards GDP, absolutely, certainly there's going to be higher IFFs from trade just because there is just so much trade. This is something that we can just see on the surface. A country with large trade proportion is going to have higher trade-related, at least, IFFs. But where is one IFF, there's probably going to be another IFF. So that was my answer, my remark to the previous question. I will just give the floor to Bojan. Let me read it. I haven't yet.
Thank you, Anastasia. Yeah, so I mean, I think the question that Alec has asked and the one that we see in the chat, what is the attitude of countries in estimating IFFs, are very closely related. Now, in our project that has just finished in Africa, so we have worked with 11 plus 1, so 12 countries in Africa on measuring tax and commercial illicit financial flows. Obviously, the first thing when we started off, so the activity started more than a year ago, we've seen a lot of interest and a lot of expectation that, okay, we will now measure illicit financial flows and all of our problems will be solved. Now, there is a huge discrepancy there. First of all, even when you measure illicit financial flows, in policy actions, you still need to find ways to divert those illicit financial flows into formal economy and then tax them or somehow otherwise collect the, the revenues. On the other hand, illicit financial flows are a hugely sensitive area. So in the whole process, even though we said this is a technical task, this is a statistical task, we want to work with statisticians and statistical experts, there was a required, and we still propose it to be a, let's say, whole of government approach or a high level buy-in. You need to have support from above in order to drive the work at the national level to produce estimates. Now, sensitivity is still there, obviously. We are arguing that essentially it is much better for a country to produce their own statistics because they have access to their own confidential data, whereas researchers from abroad may not have it. And they can always then decide and see how much of that statistics can be pushed forward as an evidence-based. We do support and try to support countries to measure and later on report on illicit financial flows through projects, through consultations, through guidance, through methodological material, even Stats Café seminars, as you have like this one today, to raise awareness first, and second of all, to share experience and lead as an example. In the 12 African countries, not all the countries were able to reach results in terms of estimating illicit financial flows. And second of all, not the one, so about half of the countries have reached some of the estimates, but not all of them have shared their results. Some are still refining them, such as Zambia, for example, and Egypt. Namibia has already produced results. Senegal, on the other hand, has said, we have results, but we are keeping it privately for now. We want to work on those a little bit. So we still have a long way to go. And I think with through cooperation, sharing of experience and lessons, I think we can get there, hopefully in a few years' time to essentially produce and populate the SDG 1641 data sets. So I'll stop here for now. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Alex, is it a new hand or?
Sorry, just wanted to share something. When I was at a conference on illicit financial flows in Africa, this is what it looked like.
Looks like some serious business going on there. Thank you. We had a hand up.
Sorry, I just wanted to make a point that in Africa, the illicit financial flows is very much a big issue because they're unanimously feeling that they're getting a bad part of the deal and having their resources, money being drained away. In Asia and the Pacific, for whether it's due to the lack of awareness or conflict of interest, I don't know what, but there's not as much interest as there is in Africa, and that's rather unfortunate. And I wish that there's more spotlight personally on this and the policy, and there's demand from the policymakers to address it.
Thanks, Alex, for those insights. I think we had a hand from Sharjah.
Yes, yes, Alec. Many of the things were like discussed, so I kind of lowered my hand. But this is one issue, a very, very important issue, which countries are really struggling. But the willingness of the countries have to be there, and they have to be totally on board. As very nicely, it's such nice presentations, and I was totally absorbed in listening to various country presentations, and of course the third presentation, and how the framework has been defined. But because we have to have data from different sources in the country, all the departments have to be totally on board. And maybe the journey may not be a very easy one, but it is always very important to initiate it and very formally get in touch with those departments, and kind of, because the data is there but it is not being maintained for obvious reasons. So probably, having worked in one country for such a long time and in one of such departments, nobody wants to maintain such a data, but I think there will have to be a start at some point of time. And I think to that extent, UNESCAP is doing wonderful work. And maybe, we can pilot 5 countries, 6 countries, and start working very, very closely with them. And once we have good estimates from them, maybe the others will also imitate. Thank you so much, speakers, and thank you, Alik, and all of you for those very nice presentations. And thank you, Rike and Alec, for really arranging this type of a Stats Cafe. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharjah. Bojan, there is one question from Bangladesh. Maybe this will be our last question for the cafe.
Yes,
Should
thank
I
you,
read
Alec.
it out?
So can you please enlighten us about your next course of plan after this pilot project? I think actually, a question could also, of course, be addressed to you, Alik. I know you're aware. I mean, you're leading the baton in your region. But let me just get back very briefly. So what Alex has said, I think, is also very crucial. So in Africa, there's a lot of excitement about it. There's a lot of commitment, and because they say we are losing so much. In some of the earlier work, let's say in the last decade, it has been kind of put a sticker to the illicit financial flows as if this is only a problem of developing countries, which is not. So illicit financial flows are crossing the border. So when somebody is losing, somebody else is gaining, and gaining is also a problem. It is fueling corruption, it is undermining the state authorities, and so on. So this is a global process. This is a global phenomenon, obviously a global challenge. We are trying to reach out to countries, for example, in Europe, to also measure illicit financial flows, to also test the methods. Ireland, Italy, they're members of the task force. Malta has joined recently with the exercises to trying to get in on board. So, and as Sharjah has said, the more and more countries are involved, the more and more there will be transparency, also peer pressure on others, and leading as an example. So I think this is the way forward. Now, in the course, so the courses or the action steps after this pilot are, of course, trying to provide support in terms of guidance and guidelines to the countries that are requesting it, so that where we can work, where we have commitment, where we have attempts to measure illicit financial flows. And one of those, I believe, good steps is also the new UN Development Account Project, which will take place globally, which means in all regions of the UN. However, the problem is that, of course, the funds are limited, which means that only a handful of countries in each region may be able to participate directly. However, we do try and we hope that there will be large spillover effects in terms of measurement, but also in terms of policy action that are following. So I hope I've addressed the question to Bangladesh, but Alik, maybe I'll leave it to you to maybe add the final point on this. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Boyan. It's a good question, and I think I know Bangladesh is one of those countries that are showing more interest in this. And I'm just going back to the same question that we addressed earlier on about how sensitive is this topic. And I think the honors and success of measuring IFF is mainly on the countries themselves are expressing interest. And I think as partners, we value that much instead of us really telling countries what area they should focus on. So I know Bangladesh has shown some interest, and I think going forward, these are some of the issues we can actually take on a bilateral or case-by-case basis. Like Bojan said, for the upcoming project, there's a limited fund. There might be very few countries involved, but I think we'll try to focus on countries that are showing more willingness. But if we look at the current frame of the project that is coming to an end, there were two key objectives. One is to make sure that there is enough and adequate data to measure 16.41. Secondly, to also build statistical capability within the country at a sustainable basis beyond external support. So we look forward to countries really internalizing this as part of their statistical production process, even without the engagement of UNCTAD, UNODC, or the regional commissions per se. So we did want countries to internalize this into their work structure beyond the pilot project. So we are looking at these projects in that kind of broad perspective, no time span, but as long as we produce statistics here. Thank you. We are 6 minutes past the scheduled time, so I think we should be coming to the end of this Stats Café, and I would like to thank all the presenters for really putting up a good show on the time and answering the questions. I would also like to thank my colleagues, Ayo, Kai, Anastasia, Chingiz, and Rike, who have worked behind the scenes to get this done. And just for your information, this has been recorded, so you can actually check these sessions online. There's a link that has been posted there. Finally, can I ask Enrique to give us some very closing remarks?
Oh, thanks, Ali. That was not planned, but I'm very happy to do so.
Please.
Yes, I mean, let me just also extend my thanks to the excellent presenters we've had today, and also to you, Alec, for moderating so excellently. I'm very pleased to see that there is such broad interest in this topic. As you've heard from several, we are really into new terrain here in terms of measurements and statistics, and knowing a bit more about illicit financial flows, I mean, does have potentially large gains for our societies. So there's a lot of work to do, but definitely it's worth the effort. And what I just want to add also to the latest comments here about, what comes next. I mean, one thing is that, yes, there is a pipeline project, meaning that ESCAP, together with UNCTAD and other partners, will continue to be able to provide relatively intense support to a few selected countries. I wanted to add also that the best argument that I have to raising funds for statistics development is interest by countries. So those of you who have listened in and thought, okay, this is something that we really would like to embark on, go back, have consultations with your colleagues, with your supervisors. If it's still something you want to prioritize going forward, then let me or my team here at ESCAP know, because this is the weightiest argument we have for actually channeling resources into activities. It's always possible to seek support also outside pipeline projects. So I just wanted to encourage everyone to not be shy. Let us know if this is something you want to prioritize, and then we will do what we can to make sure that there's some resources flowing to this area. So a big thank you again from me, and do enjoy the rest of your afternoon, evening, or wherever, yes, you are calling in from. Thank you so much.